Okay, well, we've got another question that came in from April, who asked,
From April, like the month, or April the person?
April the person. It's an April question in April. Greg, you're being an April fool.
I just taught my 6-year-old daughter about April Fool jokes. We had a blast on April Fool's Day. Anyway.
Well, before we get into the question, there was a nice April Fool's post on the KaiNexus blog that Maggie Millar wrote. I would encourage people to go and look at it. The KaiNexus KISS system.
Add-on. Yep, we worked on that for months. I hope everyone really gets a lot of value from it.
how to apply continuous improvement to your family and your life at home, right?
Exactly.
But April's question, so a lot of times when Greg and I talk about Kaizen, our default almost always means small, staff-driven continuous improvement ideas. The phrase Kaizen event, to me, that's a form of Kaizen. So April's question was, when planning a Kaizen event, in healthcare, people often call these rapid improvement events, what is your process? After clearly defining the problem and business case, how do you determine the scope and the goals? So I'll throw out a couple ideas. One, for a real kind of detailed deep dive, I do recommend a book called The Kaizen Event Planner by Karen Martin and Mike Osterling. If you go to Karen Martin's website, you just do a Google search for Karen Martin Kaizen Event Planner. You'll find her website, Karen Martin Associates. She's got a lot of free webinars, a lot of really detailed information, and I recommend the book. But the Kaizen event is usually 3 to 5 days. It can be shorter, but let's call it a week-long Kaizen event. The work to plan the event is usually greater than the week itself, where people might start 8 weeks in advance, defining the problem, doing an initial Kaizen event charter, forming a team, collecting data, and I think the question around determining scope and goals is an iterative discussion. You've got your starting point, and then you talk to your leaders and you get their input and you refine the scope. Someone might give guidance to say, nah, that seems too big, narrow that down a little bit. You're forming the team, you're doing some initial pre-work before the event, and you may learn from that and change some of your scope accordingly. So I think of it as an iterative process as you're getting ready for the event, and I think there's a real strong correlation between the amount of planning and the quality of planning and the expected outcome of the event. So it's by no means a situation where you plan and have the week scripted and you know exactly what's going to happen. That wouldn't be a good event. But you've certainly done the work to make sure you've got what seems like a reasonable scope, that you've got who you think are the right people involved, and that you've got the ability to actually go pilot some changes instead of spending a week coming up with a to-do list. So, I mean, I think that's my general question to April, or my response to April's question is to spend a good amount of time on that up front, and don't expect to have the perfect idea right away. Do some iteration.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I can really add to that is from a KaiNexus standpoint, where does the platform, where does the software come into that? And then I'll make one caveat at the end about my thoughts on events in general. But that whole planning process of the iterations on figuring out what is the scope, perhaps there's going to be some documents that need to be tracked along, perhaps that the charter is evolving over that 4 to 8 week process. All that can occur very well, and almost all of our customers are if they're doing events, then they're using KaiNexus to help manage that event. What's interesting is that a lot of the magic of the event happens because people are in a room and there might be some butcher paper, or they go out into Gemba and actually roll up their sleeves and figure out what the process is. Documenting what happens there is probably the only way the KaiNexus platform is going to be used during the event, because that magic really happens when people are talking and conversing and kind of iterating. And then what we constantly heard, and it was actually the initial problem that we aimed to solve by building the Kaizen event management features in KaiNexus, was that follow-up process where people said, oh, we got 30 improvements out of the event. We did 7 of them during the event, but on that 30-day check-in and that 60 and then 90-day check-in, nothing was really happening because the team didn't have an asynchronous way to all stay together to make sure those are happening. And so what we see is people that manage Kaizen events in KaiNexus are able to make sure all those improvements end up getting completed. Whether they create a change or not is just a determination of what the actual problem they're looking to solve is. But that's kind of where KaiNexus fits in. And then my one other comment, and I looked at events initially way before I knew Mark, when I was just learning about Kaizen, and my initial take on them was, wow, nothing continuous about events. Events sound like episodic improvement, which we know doesn't create a culture of continuous improvement. And once I started talking with Mark, and he started explaining to me that the popularity of events has really been a manifestation of kind of the consultant culture, because it's very easy for a consultant to come on site for a week and really help kind of spur and lead that process on. That's not to devalue the value of events. Events certainly have their place. They're a very effective top-down mechanism, but we've seen over and over and over, and we actually have some great charts and data to show this in KaiNexus, where the kind of the episodic nature of the event and it then not leading to a culture of continuous improvement. So I don't think you should go into thinking, oh, we are going to develop a culture of continuous improvement by doing an event each month. That just will not happen. You'll certainly solve a lot of problems each month, but you won't kind of create that culture, if you will.
Yeah, and my understanding of the history of the Kaizen event, or what was often called the Kaizen blitz in the United States in the 1980s, you had Shingijutsu consulting firm from Japan, flying people back and forth. It made sense to come and spend a week and then go fly home. But my understanding is that the intent of these Kaizen blitzes was to demonstrate that improvement was possible, to spur on and inspire ongoing continuous improvement. That would be, I think, the ideal situation. If you do some events, and you're going to need events, I think, to solve relatively large systemic problems, but you should also be doing ongoing continuous improvement. We see similar things if we think about Mary Greeley Medical Center, one of our great customers. They were doing events. We helped them with something called a workout, which is a 90-day improvement blitz of everybody in every department coming up with an improvement. But Mary Greeley did that as a way to set the foundation for ongoing Kaizen, daily continuous improvement, which we also helped them with a year and a half ago, I think it was, and 2.5 years ago. And and helped them and kicked that off in a couple of departments, proved it out. Ron Smith and their team there, we've got a webinar in our library on the Mary Greeley story. There's stuff on the website about their workout success. This all ties together. Big improvement, small improvement, events, continuous improvement, episodic improvement. It can all coexist, and I think the common theme, last point I'll make, is that it's all PDCA or PDSA. Plan, do, check, act. It's all in that same style.
It's interesting, and this is really about trivia, because I don't think we're going to be able to probably get to our next questions based on time, but when I was doing all of my research for the paper that I published in Academic Emergency Medicine, where maybe people don't realize, but I'm an emergency medicine doctor that realized there was all this improvement science that could be applied to the emergency department, and published a paper on it. But when I was doing it, Berwick is often credited as the first person to talk about Kaizen. I'm sorry?
Don Berwick.
Don Berwick, I don't know. Yeah. Is being credited to introduce Kaizen to healthcare, but I actually found a number of references in the literature going back to 82, 83, if my memory serves me correctly, about describing this blitz process. And interestingly enough, it was being done in the pharmacy departments. And the pharmacy departments are some of our, in at least our healthcare customers, some of our kind of most progressive departments that are applying these principles. And so I just think it's an interesting, I had totally forgotten about the blitz being kind of a predecessor to the, I mean, to me, I don't like it because it reminds me of Blitzkrieg, but but I like the event as semantically better, but as really being probably the first ways Kaizen and even this was even before the term lean was coined, was finding its way into healthcare. So
yeah,
interesting piece of trivia.
Yeah, so I think we're going to have to wrap up today. I mean, 30 minutes goes very quickly. We got through 4 questions. I want to thank everybody who asked those questions. Greg and I think we'll try to do another Ask Us Anything, if not in May, sometime in June. We'll announce that through the website. Go to KaiNexus.com/webinars.